Well, hi, I'm Robert Cole, and I've been an artist almost all my life. From a very early age, I really got into making things. Art really interested me, and I did my first sculpture piece under a teacher at about 14, I think it was. A clay piece, a small one, of a boxer. And then, I moved through life pursuing that, and I started out my career in sculpture. My first wife and I had a child, and he's at 38 today, a great delight to me. We made it through. I got married a second time to a lady named Susan Warner, and she became Susan Cole, and we had a great adventure together. After 26 years of marriage, we're still really excited about each other. I think part of the reason that we've been able to stay together is because we know how to play together. We play music together, we like some of the same things, and we just enjoy each other's company. I got quite a bit of fame in LA and California in 1972 for these plastic sculptures of human beings, of people, kind of characters. And I was invited on the TV shows, a number of them, and finally got on Steve Allen. The whole show was devoted to me. But I became disillusioned with that world and with the toxicity of plastics. And I got really interested in music, and then I realized that that's a long journey too, but building instruments was right in my field. It was sculpture, really. So I took this long 12-year sabbatical, and I learned how to build instruments and make music. And at the end of it, I liked it. It was thrilling to build instruments and have a new sound box. But that was the problem, that I was too experimental. When you get a perfect thing, you really want to reproduce it as an instrument builder. But as an artist, you're always going down a new road looking for the Holy Grail. So there were two conflicting personalities, and I finally chose music as a second to my sculpture that I would play as a avocation, and it's proven to be a good balance in my life. If I'm asked as a point-blank question, would I encourage someone to become an artist, I'd say no. They have to want that so much. I mean, the struggle is very difficult, especially make a living at it, that I would not encourage another person to be an artist. They have to grab that like you grab the brass ring and really want it. Then you don't need to encourage them. But you do need, there's a funny thing about all art. Most artists not only do the work because they like to do it, whatever medium, they just like that and they become good at it, but they also like the attention you get from it. You do get attention, and of course, you do like that feedback. It reinforces you, and it feels like there's a certain reward for what you've done. Again, the only reward you should try and focus on as an artist is the reward that you got close to what you dreamed of doing, what your vision was. And so that's the main reason to do art, because when it becomes that you're not making money or it becomes a struggle and so forth, you have to really rely hard on the fact of, I want to do this. That's all. I want to do this, and if I have the means and the wherewithal, I'm going to produce this idea. And that will see you through. I've been an artist for 40 years, and I've gone through every level of struggle you can possibly go through, and I've managed to weather them through because of the one fact that when I got down to the nitty-gritty, I said, look it, I want this. I'm going to do it. What I found is two basic approaches to creating artwork of any type, probably. One of them is a very spontaneous approach, where we're kind of like jamming, like jazz, It's having maybe a general idea, a general approach, and then you discover it. And that's very exciting. It's a wonderful way to approach it. The other way is to have a vision, and you have this idea that's pretty, maybe not totally crystallized, of course, but enough crystallized that you see it and you want to produce it, and therefore you've got to bend the medium to make it do what you want to do. So these are really diametrically opposed approaches, because one, you're kind of floating with it and doing whatever you can, and the other one is you're going to bend the medium to your will. Now, I happen to use both approaches, and a lot of artists have tried to synthesize these two aspects, because if you just do one without the other, it can get dry. It can dry up on you, So if you have both approaches available to you, what happens is you can rely on one or the other, and you get the best of both worlds. But anyway, the idea being that I think the ultimate goal is to be able to use both. And I've been able to do that in my work, although I would say probably a vast majority of my work is of the vision type. I get strong visions, and the interesting thing about it is that ideas that I had 40 years ago, though I was working in a medium that didn't last, it wasn't as permanent as I was looking for, and that's the reason I left that medium. The ideas were good enough for me to do them 40 years later in a very permanent medium and be happy with the result, and the idea lasted. So there was a curious blend of those two, where now I had a vision that's very old in my mind, and I'm using a new medium, so that it required me to use my will to make that vision happen close to the other one, but not to restrict myself so much that I slavishly followed the original idea, that I allowed the new medium to open up and show me things of small differences that I could produce. This is one of these plastics works. It's based upon a cubistic idea of seeing many realities at once. But in my work here, it goes to the flat plane and then it expands back to 3 dimensions. And it uses color a lot so that you can equalize the 3D and the 2D. And that causes your mind to be a little bit confused until you see that it's forcing you to see many realities at once. And that's basically a cubist idea. Here I'm getting into the human nude, which is one thing I enjoy very much, and I'm chopping and cutting and causing your eye to be delighted by those changes. Back to the flat, back to a change of color in between the face and the body. Here I've evolved beyond those figures, which I had to let go of. They were too big, and I settled on a single figure out in California, which I built quite a few of them. This is called the Everyday Housewife. This is the cowboy. Originally he had a big jail around him, and I had to take that off because it became too complex. And here's all the grouping once together. You can see the big chopper in front. They're all life size or bigger. And here's one of the first attempts after I had my studio torn down. This is a water-encased plastic solid cast, which was too fragile, and so I moved to using fiberglass. But it has a great drama. And here's another version, now current, that I intend to build 15 feet of that same old man, but obviously I've used a certain deconstruction technique on it, and that's another thing I've added to the idea of cubism. Here's Father Time, whom I felt was racing against himself, and that was kind of shocking and still a valid idea today. Now I decided to do Father Time again because it was such a good idea, only this time I put him on a motorcycle. Again, looking back scared. That idea of Father Time being scared of himself is kind of radical for me and seems to sum up my feelings about our modern culture that's moving too fast. The cowboy is an iconic image, and that's one of the things I've always been interested in. They're kind of images that everybody relates to. Now, in this particular one, this cowboy, he's called the Vanishing Cowboy, and it means to me that that idea of the cowboy, of the male, strong male, independent from society, is changing. And he carries a cell phone in his hand to make him modern. Well, I've always liked the idea of the muse. That's the mysterious guiding force in art that inspires us, and this is a version of that muse set in a stainless steel frame. This is called Two Faces, and it actually has a mirror behind the eyes so that when you see it and move in front of it, it reflects in different ways. It's made out of bronze and stainless steel to give that dynamic of change between the two materials and the two angles of the face. Again, I'm trying to create movement within the piece, even though it's a static piece, because the light reflects off those two surfaces differently. You get a slight sense of movement. I get into doing a lot of furniture, mostly for myself, but I have been able to sell them to people because people enjoyed them very much. This is one of my chairs built out of bronze and stainless steel. I got into trying to do wall pieces that would be a little less expensive. Sculpture gets to be pretty expensive, and I wanted to create some works that were affordable. This is one called the Waterfall. Here we have an interpretive process that makes them just slightly dangerous, giving an edge to a tulip, which is such a beautiful, soft thing. That seemed to me a really neat idea. This is a big sun disk. It's about 4 feet in diameter, and it projects out quite a bit from the disk surface, so it gives a great 3D feeling. I love to do the human figure. It's the most challenging thing we could possibly do as an artist, I think. And here, again, I can't give you a full piece without opening it up. So you can see this blown through technique that begins to tell you that it's hollow, and yet I still maintain that illusion. This is hammered bronze, very difficult. It's not done in clay and cast. It's actually, every one of those pieces is hammered to shape, then welded and then ground down and polished. I saw a photograph in the New York Times of a dancer, and that gave me the idea to go ahead and build this large 16-foot version. I'd done some smaller wall pieces where I used the frame as the setting, and I really enjoyed that. It was really neat. It brought a lot to the freshness to the sculpture. So I decided to do a large one, and this is that idea called Phoenix Rose at 16 feet. This flute player is an experiment in opening up the human figure and completely, really chopping it open, and also creating a certain amount of kinetics. Her face moves slightly. When I created the studio that I have, it's a perfect party place. And of course, I think that one of the ways that you have to move forward as an artist in the world is you have to make a splash. And one of the ways that I would make a splash was to celebrate all the good fortune that I was having and share it with everybody by throwing a big party. The studio lends itself very well to that kind of thing. A lot of these parties go to 5 in the morning, but they're great events. They're a lot of fun. A lot of musicians will stop by, jam with us, and it's a very spontaneous kind of thing. We'll actually get people dancing and carrying on, 5, 6, 7 hours.
Well, I ain't got no talent, I ain't no star. Let me tell you, honey, I know where my heart lies, but I'm working with you.
Every year the city of Washington has an arts walk, and they look for places around the city to put sculpture and various performance pieces. In October about 1997, I was looking to be a part of that, and I had some large sculpture. So I approached them that if they would pay for the pedestals, I could get a few of my friends and we would tear out this green stuff and place sculpture pedestals and create a sculpture park. And they went for it. So increasingly over time, it became practically my sculpture park, since I am very prolific and I had a lot of work that I could place in here. So this is what you see now as the last show. We're about to tear it down because GSA is going to sold the property and going to build here. But it's been a wonderful experience, and I really encourage all the cities to use any spot that they have that's vacant like that to create something like this, because the people have just enjoyed it immensely. One of the things I've always been interested in is movement. And movement is very difficult to show in the human figure, because the minute you get that kind of attenuated gesture, it looks frozen. So, but I kept attempting it, and then I'd go in and out. Lots of times I'd do a figure that's just kind of just barely beginning to move from a walking stance, and that suggestion would work. But along with a lot of experiments that I was running, I got into the dynamics of and flexibility of a piece of steel. And most people don't realize it, but steel, even those big I-beams, are very flexible. Steel has a great deal of flex. So when I saw that, that led me down the road of movement again and kinetics. And so I did a lot of experiments in using the steel for its flexibility, of which this is one of those pieces. For my kinetic experiments in the flexibility of steel, I began to build this type of sculpture here. There are flat plates, and they're bent in one direction, and then they're flashed with grinders to give them more life. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the way I discovered that all art had 3 categories or aspects to it. It had a technical side, it had an emotional side, and it had an aesthetic side. And that usually great works of art, or very powerful works of art, had all those 3 things in balance. So part of the issues here are very much technical in the sense that the welds work, and that the structure is very strong and will last, who knows, thousands of years, hopefully. The second is the idea of motion, and that just to produce this as a flat plate, you can see how now it moves to absolutely a different, almost different sculpture, and those plates become paper thin. And that's one of the reasons why I started to give them movement this way, was that so that from the side they didn't just disappear. And then there's a subtle physical structure that holds these plates, which are only 1/8" steel, so that they don't wave too much and collapse and hit each other. My main concern comes back to the human figure. And so the largest piece that I've been able to deal at this time has been what I call opus humanum, which is this guy pulling this chain. So this adds an emotional content that you can't get with the other work. So now you see me opening up this and creating my own architecture in here, an architecture that depends upon the movement of the piece as well as it does upon the architecture of the own human body. In other words, how does muscle look and how should it look? That's where I start, but then I begin to violate that as you see the way I open up this side of the piece and absolutely destroy all of it, showing you that it's absolutely hollow and that it's illusion, but somehow we still believe in this image, which is a mysterious thing that I keep repeating because I can't understand it. How can you see it so graphically opened up and still believe it? So this is a synthesis of all that I've learned about bringing, to this point I must say, all that I've learned about opening up the human figure, about creating my own architecture, about still maintaining a recognizable image, and content. Blending all those three things, technical, emotional, and aesthetics. There's three basic processes to constructing a sculpture piece in metal. One is cutting, and the other is grinding and welding and finishing. What happens is when you're cutting on a high temperature torch, it's hotter than the metal will melt, so it instantly cuts. And you can move very, very rapidly with it if you can control it. The problem with it is that it's so sensitive that if you just flinch or breathe a little bit improperly, you'll move the cut. So you have to learn to, like a yoga, to stand very still and keep your breathing very clear so that you can cut that perfect line. Or many times when I'm building a sculpture piece like that, I build it outdoors from start to scratch. And then when the right time comes, we hire a crane and it comes in and snatches it up and puts it on the truck. And then we take it out to the site where the crane arrives again and we take it off. On this particular piece, I wanted to build it inside. So I built it in two halves. That's the base and the top. And in the studio, I built it together, but we never could see it out. We had to make sure, we had to take it outside to make sure. Now, I don't have a very efficient system to pull it up. So this friend of mine, Chaz Houseneck, he's the one that helps me do all this. And so I hired him to come and we lifted this piece up with a simple chain and hoist pulley. And as you can see, as we're cranking this up, we had to physically lift it to get it started because there was no crane. We had to, three of us had to really lift the weight of that piece, and that piece weighs probably 1,200 pounds. It's a very beautiful piece, and you can see it moving in the wind. It's quite dynamic. From a distance, it looks almost chaotic, and it's supposed to. And as you come closer to it, it begins to gain a certain order, a certain logic. And that was the intended purpose of it, that you would have that chaotic feeling, and then you could, if you studied it, see an order. There's a logic to it as you go around it, as you see it from all different sides. The Metro in Washington had a competition in which I won the Naylor Road station, which had two pod trees, or two planters on either side, and I designed a pod tree, or mushroom tree as I call it, to go on either side. There are two of them, and this is it here. Usually a sculptor makes a maquette. It's called a maquette from the French word, and it means the rough idea. And then after that is decided, you get a kind of look at it, you make a model. The model is transferred directly from the size that it's supposed to, that you're making it, maybe 1/3 size, and the measurements can be taken directly to the larger piece. So you have some idea where you're going. So what I did is I shortened it from a 20-foot tree down to about a 13-foot tree, so that I could move it easier and so that I could control it, the building of it, and made it wider, more elongated, and with a more twist to it. So this particular tree is built on a twisting limb. So once I had established the foundation of that that real strong cantilever there. Then I began to solve it almost like a puzzle of where those twists would go. And we got, each piece is cut with a plasma torch again, then it's ground down, the sides are all polished out, and then we bend it between two pipes that we bolt down to the cement. And we just physically bend it with torque, and sometimes it takes 3 of us. Then I invented a couple tools that are like forks that would grab those thin pieces and could twist them, because some of the pieces had to be twisted as well as bent, because they gain strength when they're twisted a lot. And the problem with this piece was that there was going to be like 1,200 pounds on top of 1,200 pound base, and that was an awful lot of cantilever and structure to be supported by just those tiny limbs. If you tune it in more, if you turn it in more, okay, that's a little bit far out, isn't it, to the edge? I don't think we can get in anymore. Okay, all right.
In where?
Here's like that. All right. We didn't get the pods until the very end, and the measurements that we'd taken worked pretty good. Because those things are bent like that, we could torque them and twist them a little bit and make them fit. Then another thing, the original design had the pods not touching each other. There was airspace between each one, and from a distance that gave it a certain look. But when I got those pods up there, each one of the big ones weighs 75 pounds. There was just no way I could do it. It was just impossible. So we had to tie one pod to another, so they build up like in a stacked effect. As it turned out, it didn't hurt the effect of it, the aesthetic look of it at all, and it made the tree much stronger. There was a big operation in getting these 2 pod trees to the Metro at night, first of all, because the Metro required us to set this thing between 12 midnight and 6 in the morning, so we would be out of the way of any traffic. So what we did is we got it all arranged, and we got the crane truck there, and we loaded them on, so we had them on 2 trucks, and we had this caravan of 5 vehicles. We began snaking out of the city at something like, I guess it was 12:15. It took us 2 hours to just go maybe 10-minute, 20-minute ride is all it is in a normal car. But we went so slow because we had a wide load and we had a height problem. You can't do a piece any more than 14 feet, or you might not get under a bridge, or there might be a telephone wire there. And we were just topping out right there. They're 12 feet big, and the trailer's about 2 feet off the ground. So we were really close. So we just had to snake and stop anytime we were worried if we couldn't get under a bridge or something, or anytime there was a wide load. When we got there, we had the big crane pick these up, and start to move it up there, and I saw it lift up into the sky, and it was so exciting. I grabbed the camera from my wife and immediately said, "You got to get under there, you got to get under there," and I ran under there and laid down and caught that shot of that big mushroom pod tree coming across the sky late at night. I think that one of the reasons that I won the Metro Commission is because I created something that appealed to their sense of the environment. I mean, after all, the Metro is trying to get riders, not just to make it a profitable organization, but because it cuts down on pollution of one person, one car. And this is a tree-like form. It's really a sculpture piece. It's not a tree, obviously. It's a stainless steel sculpture piece. But it stems from the same principles and is built on the same principles that nature builds on. I study trees, and I study the way they can cantilever and the support they need, and the way they're designed both for aesthetics, for their beauty, and for their amazing engineering. And so this piece here, these 2 pod trees, as I call them, really relate to that understanding of that trees are very, very important to our whole world. I mean, that's where we get our oxygen. So they represent kind of a symbolic statue or dedication to the great idea of a tree, and they're very beautiful. They're very aesthetic. People just like them. The great cantilever that they have has a kind of movement of the human body, and it has that kind of drama to it. So the response has been just tremendous. People have liked them, and they don't seem to have any problem with the fact that they're not really a tree and they're not really a sculpture. They're almost something in between. I feel that getting old is a very difficult thing, especially in a youth culture that idolizes beauty and youth so much. But I think you have to kind of be real about life, you know. You get to your wrinkles, you should be proud of them. You've lived long, you have the marks of time on your face. Why should you want to change the look of your race? I think that, the body wears down. I felt even though the body destructs over time and gets weakened and deteriorates, the soul and the spirit of a person should not. You should keep that joy of life if you found it. I hope you found it. You should keep that and really let that guide you through into death. And that's what this old man, it's called the last step in the final waiting line. And that movement that way, he's not depressed. He's not hanging his head. He's half there, but he's going into death with a positive feeling that he lived his life. And I think if you can say at the end of your time that you've done everything you wanted to do, then you should be comfortable with being old. And if not, well, then you should get to it and keep doing it until you, like the great expression of, well, I died in the saddle. That meant you died doing what you were really happy doing. And I expect that to be my course, since I can't stop sculpting no matter whether I try or not. It's in my blood. I have to do it.